Well, it's always been a dream for me to say live from the heart of London's West End, and bloomin' heck, I can say it with impunity because I am at the Coliseum in London, one of London's finest theatres, for a very specific reason. And yet, there's no point trying to tease who it is, because the thing with a podcast is, you know. Otherwise, you wouldn't have clicked on it. You've not just come along thinking, who's he talking to? But it is Ben Elton.
Oh, lovely to be here. They may just tune in to anybody you'd speak to, so that it could be that. It could be, oh, it's Ben Elton, lovely to be here.
You do notice when people tease these intros, and I think it was maybe the one with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, where he stopped midway through and said, why am I teasing who this is? Because you've looked at it. We're here at the Coliseum, Ben, for a very special reason. Tell us why.
Well, pretty exciting. We Will Rock You, the musical I wrote for and with Queen, of their greatest hits. Not all of them. Queen are one of those, well, perhaps that rarest of all bands, I suppose maybe the Beatles and the Stones, who've got so many greatest hits you can't fit them in a single musical, but a lot of their greatest hits. And we're bringing it back. It ran for a rather splendid 12 years at London's Coliseum. But it's not been in London for 5 or 6 years now, been plenty of other places, and now we're bringing it back to this magnificent theatre for a limited season, because you can't get a Coliseum for a run. No. It's too posh. They put us in between the operas, and so we've got this fabulous summer season, big new production of We Will Rock You. Very exciting. It is a beautiful theatre.
And Ben Elton can currently be seen at the Coliseum.
And I can be seen.
Yes, now that's the thing. Because,
oh, my goodness.
Okay, so you've written it, you're directing it, but there's another layer.
There is another layer. So this is a really big moment for me personally, because I've decided to cast myself. It was a tough audition. I mean, the director was an absolute swine, but won him over in the end. And yes, I offered myself the part, and I'm really glad to say I accepted. The cast of We Will Rock You are always the best we can get, So Brenda Edwards is returning as Killer Queen. She did 2 years for us at the Dominion, and Lee Mead is having his We Will Rock You cherry broken. I don't know if that's a word to say. He's never been in it before. That seems to be doobling along. Anyway, the point is we're putting in some great musical theatre talent, but well known, because it's such a huge theatre.
I would never have gone there. He's never been in it before.
Yes,
but
I know.
If you want to bring it to the table.
I spot a double where people, I fossick them out where people never thought they could possibly have existed.
He's never been in it before.
I mean, when Rick Mayall and I used to tour together in our bus, we started trying to work out this board game called Double. And it would have been so good. And where the idea is you land on the thing and you get a sort of innocuous sentence and you have to create a double out of it, a double entendre. You have to make a knob gag. The sentence is, I caught the 4:15 to Crewe, and somehow you've got to turn that into an earnest. Yeah. And of course, we had a great luck. But it doesn't really work. For a start, you've got to go where doubles are not, and then put it into your delivery. Anyway, we're digressing. I don't know if this is how your podcast works. We're sort of leaping
Today it is your podcast.
From crag to crag, like a giddy comedy mountain goat. Anyway, so Brian and Roger said, and what about Pop, the rebel leader? And we were thinking, and then it just sort of, suddenly the idea was in the room, and, we've seen you do it a lot, etc. And suddenly I'm playing the character, and I said to my wife, do I really want to do this 3 months, every day?
Ben, I'm only going to interrupt you to say you're not aware of this. The safety curtain is going up behind you.
And I'm
sure that's going to be caught on that shot. And what a lovely moment.
Isn't that a lovely moment?
What a lovely moment.
Goodness gracious. It should have been Eamon Andrews at that point coming through.
Yeah.
No, Ben.
I only tell you because there's nothing worse, is there, when one is on stage, something is happening that one is unaware of.
Oh, Rob,
because you don't want that. You want to be in control.
You see, they say you're a very generous podcast host. I'd heard that.
So come on. So they said, wait a minute. We've got to pop. We've got to pop.
That was kind of how it was, and that was for the comedy. But the reason we got on to Blowing Your Own Trumpet, so I think I feel confident about that. I wrote the role. I've added some great new gags. Yeah. I'm giving myself some.
I think you'll be fine.
Hopefully it'll be all right. But obviously, I have to sing a song.
Which one does Pop sing?
Well, he sings the sublime Roger Taylor ballad, "Days of Our Lives."
Oh,
which carries enormous emotional weight, both in the piece, but much more so for those who know and love Queen, which is an awful lot of people. Quite a lot of them come and see "We Will Rock You," because of course it was the number one Queen that Freddie never knew he got, because it was number one after he died. And of course his vocal, which was one of the last he ever laid down, say, rock and roll. He sang the fabulous Days of Our Lives, and it's a very important Queen song. But it's also a very reflective and quiet song. It's a man looking back on a rock and roll life well lived, which is exactly what the character's doing on stage. It's coming down again.
I have to tell you
it's almost like I was just too slow. If I'd done that 5 seconds earlier, I would have made that happen.
I had to tell you about it's coming down after I told you about it's going up.
Because you got my camera. I can see, although it's rarely on me. I know how you work, Brydon. I know how you work.
It's mostly on me. You see those things, sometimes you see it on the interviews where the interview is a big deal. It's a hell of a lot of shots.
The nod is always done. He's doing absolutely. So the song is a thing. But Roger, of course, Ryan and Roger are all over the music. We Will Rock You is a passion project for the three of us. We work on every single production. No other hit musical is like that. You don't see the original creative team returning every single time. Literally, we're unique in that. But that's because our show is organic. The script changes a little bit as it goes along. Sometimes we change the song order. There are 2 new songs in the show for the Coliseum.
Well, which ones?
The Show Must Go On is now in the show. It was never in at the Dominion. And Don't Stop Me Now. So the theatre will be going crazy. Everyone will be screaming for the incredible Queen rock anthems. Alone on stage in a spotlight, there's this old sad guru with his long grey hair and his denim. He's a bit status quo, and he sometimes, I get to thinking, and he starts his song and alone on that stage, and that is going to be a scary moment. And Roger will be in the audience for a start. I'm nervous about that. But you are a singer. It's easy for you. I've heard him. His stage, oh my goodness, he does Tom Jones and sings like Tom Jones. And you do sing like Tom Jones. Huh, as you keep doing. Sorry, I just...
Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
It's fantastic.
1973 in Vegas with Elvis.
Well, I was I was doing the Artful Dodger in the Godalming Bar.
1973 in Godalming. And I saw him. I said, my God, who is it? It was Ben Elton,
But you sing you've got a fabulous voice. Now everybody knows that.
In doing this, you've got to know Brian and Roger very well.
Very well, yeah.
What's it been like suddenly going into that world of rock stars?
Well, of course, it's a long time ago now. Brian and Roger and I have been really working closely together since 2000, when this whole thing sort of emerged. In a way, I'm more kind of thrilled and sort of shocked about it now than I was then. I think I was a lot younger. I was probably in my late 30s, and I was very, very busy. I was making a feature film with Hugh Laurie, and I was even writing a musical with Andrew Lloyd Webber. What happened to you?
What happened to him? Did he ever...
I had a lot of trouble persuading the money that Hugh Laurie was a leading man. Everyone thought he was a brilliant comedian, but it's a really romantic lead in a rom-com.
But that happens again and again, doesn't it? How many times we hear these stories of these amazing talents, and it takes you back to William Goldman's thing, no one knows anything. And
I remember being in... They even made me do screen tests with him. I said, he's obviously... People used to talk about him playing James Bond. Literally, when he was a student, and in the Footlights, a lot of... Hugh obviously is a brilliant comedian and a massive, massive brain and an extraordinarily interesting Renaissance sort of fellow, interested in so many things. But one thing he is a great actor, and he's got that intensity of stage presence. And I spotted that in Maybe Baby, the cast. Hugh Laurie's first leading role, first major role for Tom Hollander, James Purfoy, Matthew McFadden. They were all in Maybe Baby. I didn't know Matthew
was in that.
I know how to cast a movie. Let me tell you that now.
Yeah.
And not least, and Emma Thompson and Rowan Atkins, but they had a little bit of form by that time.
They were already on a roll.
So that was going on. And when I first got to meet Queen, of course I was in awe. I'm a huge Queen fan. I love rock and pop in general. We're in an opera house. Leaves me cold.
Well, they were in the charts when you were a kid, like me.
Yes, absolutely. 1975. I remember 74 I can remember Killer Queen on Top of the Pops.
Yes, so can I,
It was a kind of David Bowie moment. It was like 72 when Bowie did Starman and him and Mark Ronson were doing this extraordinary, what we now call fluid, genderqueer. They did this extraordinary thing. And then a year or so later, then Queen exploded, and they had the same impact as Bowie had. They were so strange. It weren't like Bowie, but they were these strange creatures from another world, fronted by this fabulous frontman. So 74, it's Killer Queen, which isn't even a rock song, really. Yeah, it's a cabaret. It's 1920s.
Yes,
it's almost Kurt Weill,
yes.
It's a strangely theatrical number and a great precursor for the smorgasbord of musical styles that Queen put in every song, virtually. Pop band, rock band, cabaret band, classical band, opera band. And I remember this shocking song and this shocking band and how brilliant it was. And the next year I left home. I was only 16. With my parents' love and consent, I went away from home because I wanted to study a theatre studies A-level, and the only place you could do it was a tech in Stratford-on-Avon, and was living in digs and then a caravan. And it was very lonely and very, very scary. And Queen were number one for the whole of my first term with Bohemian Rhapsody. Imagine that. I left home, Queen were at number one. 9 weeks later, I went over for Christmas. Queen was still at number one with Bohemian Rhapsody. As kids, I think everyone understood the sort of outsiderness of Fred. The fact that even though he was the most fabulous and exotic creature imaginable, he sort of represented us. There's a connection with. There's something There's a kind of sadness, a vulnerability. There's something in there that makes you see if you happen to be lonely at the time, as I was, and you see Bohemian Rhapsody, and anyway, it meant a lot to me at the time. So for another question, yes, when I first got to meet Queen, my God, my mind was blown. But I was also busy, and they'd come to me, you believe it or not, not like, oh, you could have our musical, but just, we want it funny, and if you've got any ideas, we're interested. I mean, it was that.
How much was there? They came to you saying, write something around our songs, and then you invented...
Well, that's kind of what happened in the end. What happened was Jim Beach, their manager, who's so wonderfully played by Tom Hollander. Anyway, Jim approached me. So I went to meet Jim, and what had happened was they'd already written a musical, not Queen. Some writers in America had written a Queen musical based on Freddie's life. Well, really on Freddie's sad death. That was really what the musical was about. And it would have been produced by Robert De Niro. Brian and Roger really didn't want to do it. They say Freddie's... It just wasn't, it was very, very, very gloomy and dark and sad, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they came to me, and Jim said, Brian and Roger think it's too gloomy, too sad. Maybe you can look at it and maybe put in some humor, because Queen are all about humor. They're all about comedy. They laugh at life. Freddie laughed at death, he took it on the chin. Look at that video. I'm going slightly mad. It's just insane. The beauty, the artistry, not just the song, but what he does with that makeup and that cynical, wry smile. It's almost like, fuck you, death. I don't know if you can say that on podcasts or not. You probably can. But so anyway, that wasn't it. I never saw this. I don't in any way wish to diss it. And they said, would you look at it and gag it up? I said, you can't gag up the story of Fred Turn Invasion. Well, you might, but I don't think it's a right idea anyway. I said, I personally, forgive me, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I don't think the Queen Greatest Hits musical should be Freddie's biography, because Queen belongs to the world. Frankly, the music is no more Queen's than anyone else's. It's now public. It's the world. We've all grown up with it. Like the Beatles song. There's very few songbooks like that, but that are so in the DNA of culture that we all have our own Queen experiences. We've all grown up through Queen, and the songs mean so much to us. And I said, I think a Queen musical should reflect the spirit of the band. It should be a legend. It should be a comic legend. Should be something fabulous and silly, but with a bit of seriousness underneath. And they said, oh, that's interesting. You got any ideas? And I said, no. And there the matter lay, because I was directing this movie and writing this musical with Andrew about Northern Ireland terrorism, which was not ever going to be a popular hit.
Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Oh, yes, with Andy. So I was busy. That was why you said, were you in awe? And yes, I was in awe. But first, I didn't meet them first.
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
And secondly, I had a lot. And anyway, and a few months later, I had the idea for Bohemian Rhapsody, this sword in the stone legend, a guitar buried in rock, not for We Will Rock You, buried in rock. And I went back to them. I said, if you're still interested, I've got an idea. And they said, we like the idea, come in and meet us. And it was a brotherhood from the very first second. Jim said to me, if we're going to do this together, you've got to realize you're in the band. I.e., it's we're all in this together. It'll be a democracy. Nothing has ever happened in We Will Rock You without me, Brian, and Roger all agreeing. If one of us doesn't agree, then it doesn't happen. And it is incredible to be a sort of associate in a little way. They're very lovely and generous. You're in the band, Ben. And I had dinner. They had a Queen sort of dinner. And they had me and Adam Lambert. And I gave Adam some stick. I said, "I've joined bloody 15 years before you did, mate. You're the youngster. You're number 6 in the lineup. I was in after John Deacon. I was the next one. I mean, obviously I'm not in the band, but I am an associate, and it's been the most magical ride of my career.
That's an incredible thing. We don't have a lot longer, and I want. There are so many other things.
Yeah, we must move on.
When I was at school, I was in the 6th form. Early 80s, I think. I come into the youth wing one morning and I say to my friends, I can still remember, I can see it clearly. Did you see that thing last night? Which was the first episode of The Young Ones. Were you aware of that impact?
No. I looking back, I should have been, because it suddenly, everyone was talking about it. But none of us, I think, were aware. I'm sure you're the same. I mean, you had quite a long time of having to do an awful lot of hard work, not in our business, but not being famous.
Yeah.
I was lucky. I left fully by the time I was 6 months out of university. I had a BBC commission for a sitcom. It was insane, absolutely insane. But I think either way, you don't really notice it when it happens, because A, you're worried about it and you want to get it right and what's going to happen next and will it all go away? And so no, I don't think we were aware. And there's another reason. Celebrity just wasn't the same in those days. There weren't even.
No. So there was no way of communicating. You couldn't go on social media and see. But also the flip side of that was we'd watched it on BBC Two the night before, and we couldn't see it again. We couldn't see a little clip of it.
No.
It was just. I mean, it's romanticize the past, but it was kind of glorious. Did you see that? Well, maybe if you'd had the foresight to press play and record on that, because were VHSs out then?
I mean, this is 1982. It came out in the autumn of 82.
I can remember it so clearly, and I loved it, and the impact. And I particularly remember being impressed by Rick Mayall and thinking, oh, wow, that type, the sort of archetype that he was portraying, or the sort of personality.
The sort of wannabe radical is really a Tory underneath.
I'd never seen that put on a screen, but I was aware of it, and that was a wonderful thing to go, wow.
I think that was one of the things that the Young Ones did score on. A lot of journos at the time, because for a brief period it was sort of semi-celebrated, and there was a lot of, you've broken all the rules, like because you've got talking rats in the gut and a wall explodes and Vivian comes through the wall and falls in the curry or whatever. And we were also, Rick and I, no one broken any rules. I mean, the Crazy Gang used to do that. Laurel and Hardy used to do that. The Goon Show was every bit as surreal and off the wall. Because we didn't like this idea that somehow we saw ourselves as a reaction to some boring old fuddy-duddy. We loved old show business. We loved it all, even the cheesy stuff, even Terry and June, etc.
So what about when you're doing the pastiche of The Good Life?
Yeah.
What was your attitude to The Good Life in reality?
I slightly regret that Good Life riff.
That's interesting.
Because I learned very quickly what it's like to have everybody having a go at you because you're the biggest, and they were the biggest sitcom. I mean, I liked the riff, the BBC perpetrating the myth that everyone in Britain is a lovable middle class eccentric. I still remember that line. I thought that was quite clever. But looking back, it looked like a sort of attack. I mean, it was fun, Rick's in love with Felicity Kendall and won't hear a word said against her. I don't know. I mean, I've tried, me and Tarby had a little, Jimmy Tarb, Barb, Tarby, not the same. Well, anyway, we had a bit of, I did a bit of slagging off my previous, because as young comics you do, but very quickly I was on the receiving end of that, and I learnt to stop doing it.
So you changed your view on that?
Well, there wasn't so much change. I just realised that everyone's a human being. People don't realise it's actually quite painful. You're doing your thing. You didn't really realise you were, I mean, Vivian's rant on The Good Life was pretty. I'm very proud of the writing.
Yeah.
Where I think the writing was effective and where it was original, I was talking about what we weren't necessarily knew about, which was being mad and exploding hamsters. But where I think it was original was what you recognised, which was that we managed to sort of draw some new archetypes for comedy. Yeah. Because it's true to say that BBC sitcom had got very middle class. There wasn't so much Likely Lads and Till Death Us Do Part and Steptoe and Son, the genius work of the 60s, which is very much working class characters, etc. By the 80s, it was much more Rings on Their Fingers and Terry and June and Sorry. Good shows and great people. And I think the fact that we did do a bit of a jolt. We said, hey, social archetypes are changing. People are now talking about sexism and racism and Mrs. Thatcher. And there are students who want to be left-wing, but secretly they also want a nice job and a pension, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, and I was proud of that, the element I brought in, which was a sort of socio-political awareness. I'd only been a student 6 months before. So, yeah, I think that you recognise that. You saw these characters, the punk, the hippie, the sort of proto-politicised anarchist poet who actually goes home to his mum and gets his washing done. These are our generation stereotypes.
Where did the Cliff Richard obsession come from?
That was Rick. Rick, so long ago. Rick, when Rick came to me, he said, so Rick rang me as one of the great funkles, like the one we got from Queen. Rick, I knew Rick very well. We were good friends. Me, Rick and Aid were at the same university. We went to Manchester University, but I was 2 years behind them. So I only knew them for a year. They were third years when I was a first year. So I didn't know Aid very well. I was a bit, not scared of him, but he seemed cool. He is cool, but not in the way he seemed standoffish. He wasn't. But, he's quite quiet and thoughtful. Rick was everywhere. Rick was all over the place. Great show-off character, just such a huge personality, immensely impressive, and we got to be friends almost immediately. I put on some sketches in my first few weeks, and he saw in me a writer, and we were friends immediately and had remained so. So when 4 years later, when Rick got his break and Paul Jackson came and said, if you've got an idea for TV, talk to me. I'd love to see if we can do something. That's when Rick rang me and said, I need a writer. But he had the idea for the sitcom with Lisa, his girlfriend. They came to me with this idea that there would be the 4 characters and they'd be living in a student share house. And that was kind of, wasn't a lot of detail. But one of the things that Rick said was, Rick's got to be like the poet, he's right on. I gave him the politics, right on Mrs. Thatcher and Ormo Tebbs, but he already had the sort of social pretensions. Like he's a feminist, but he isn't really a feminist. And he thinks being, anti-sexist is being sexy. And he also had this thing, and he's a Cliff Richard fan. He gets everything wrong. That was what Rick wanted. He said, he thinks he's rock and roll. He thinks he's punk, but actually he's a big Cliff Richard fan. Though I said it wasn't me that wrote when Cliff Richard wrote Wired for Sound. No way was he sitting on a clean loo. Sorry, that was the no way Harpic, no way Dot. I don't know why. We had a rant about toilet cleaners at one point. But Rick's idea was that he should be a Cliff fan simply because he was a punk rock who didn't really understand punk rock.
What was the evolution of Sir Cliff's reaction to that? Because it culminated in doing the comic relief single. So how did Cliff respond to that?
He's just a lovely... the first time we knew was when his response was when we asked him to do the single. That was Richard Curtis had started comic relief. Well, we were all in it a bit, Lenny and me, but Richard and Lenny were at the core. And the first single, Richard came to us and said, can we do something with the young ones? And Living Doll was the obvious. It's such a great song written by Lionel Bart, who wrote Oliver.
Weren't you in the Godalming production of...
I was in Oliver.
You were, weren't you? The Artful Dodger.
You see, all my life's a circle. Yeah. To quote a New Seekers song from 1971, Sunrise and Sundown. Anyway...
The circle of life.
Anyone would think
not
we'd
my
been
words,
drinking.
The words of Tim Rice.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it is.
Set to the music of Sir Elton John.
Srelton. Anyway, so how did we get onto that?
We're talking about Cliff Richard.
Oh, Cliff Richard.
The first comic relief single.
We had no idea whether he liked his references. They were pretty nice. It wasn't slagging Cliff Richard. I suppose the only way you might take offence was clearly the joke was that Cliff was old school and not punk.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Cliff not only agreed to do the single, and don't forget, this was the first comic relief single, long before Red Nose Day had been even thought of. So this was not like latching onto something that everybody loves and instantly you get credibility points. So Cliff, to his great credit, he said, yes, I'd like to hang out with these mad new punks, because we were sort of considered the dangerous boys of comedy, and sing a song with them. And we met him in the studio, and I gave him the jokes, instrumental break, guys. Which instruments do you want us to break, Cliff? And he was 100% up for it, embraced it.
Because you have to go, we've touched on 2 things. Will you do this again with me at some point when you are all settled and lovely? A volume 2, because we've touched on 2 things in your career.
It's a very nice way of saying, next time, will you shut the fuck up for 5 minutes?
No, it's a very nice way of saying I want to do more of these because there's so much more to talk about.
You are a very easy fellow to talk to and a very lovely chap. And I said to you, Australian term, I'm not pissing in your pocket, mate, which means I'm not paying you a false compliment. Yeah. Why pissing in someone's pocket might be considered a good thing to do, I have no idea.
And that is where we must bid farewell to the Coliseum, here in the heart. I'm doing Terry Wogan in the heart of London's West End. Ben, thank you so much. I will see you on opening night. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rob. What a joy.